All right, so this is the last video of this chapter, and we're going to be talking about balance and the vestibular system. So the somatosensory system that comprises a set of receptors in each inner ear that responds to body position and to the movement of the head, this is known as the vestibular system. The vestibular system is comprised of these vestibular organs that contain three semicircular canals: the otolith organs, the utricle and the saccule, and you have the vestibular organs. They have two functions, okay? So these vestibular organs, they tell the position of the body in relation to gravity, and they also signal changes in the direction and speed of head movements. So this is really important for balance when you're traveling up and down stairs. You can imagine right now we spend most of our time upright, but if we think back to some of our very, very early evolutionary origins where and again, sort of the vestibular system we have is going to be pretty similar to some of the vestibular system that would probably exist in a number of other primates, and that there would be sort of climbing on trees and gathering. Even if we were doing things like hunting where we were engaging in really physical activities for survival, our vestibular system would have been really, really important because it would have helped us balance. So the vestibular system is something that we take for granted because we are, on the whole, way, way more sedentary than just basically a century or two ago. But it's still highly, highly essential. So when we run, when we walk, when we look backwards or turn to the sort of left or right, orient ourselves, our head is changing position, and the vestibular system keeps us upright and helps us keep our balance. So here's an example.
Hands on the mats. On your mark, get go.
All right, so that was a really fun example of how you can try to actually mess up your vestibular system a bit, and I'll explain what happens and how you sort of lose your balance when you spin around in the next series of slides. So when the head moves, fluid, known as endolymph, located within the semicircular canals, pushes against hair cells, which causes bending of the cilia located on top of the hair cells. So these hair cells are similar to the ones that are used for hearing and auditory information, but these are particularly involved in the vestibular system. So they are not for hearing, they are for balance. But they operate in very much the same way. So bending of the cilia leads to receptor potentials in the hair cells and action potentials in the cells forming the vestibular nerve. The direction in which the cilia are bent determines whether the hair cell becomes depolarized or hyperpolarized. So basically here, in your vestibular system, in the semicircular canals, and again, remember, the cochlea right here is where the auditory information is. So this is in the semicircular canals. So in these semicircular canals, okay, you have some of these hair cells. And so they're sitting in this fluid, and if they move to the right, they depolarize, and if they move to the left, they hyperpolarize. So depending upon which direction you move your head, if you tilt your head to the left, or if you tilt your head to the right, then the fluid that the hair cells sit in moves. So the utricle and saccule contain these hair cells, which are embedded within a gelatin-like substance that contains small crystals of calcium carbonate called otoconia. When the head is tilted, the gelatin and otoconia push against the hair cells, which alters the rate of action potential in the cells that form the vestibular nerve. So when you put your head to the left or put your head to the right, then you're going to have more activity or less activity that would then say that would then communicate to your brain, like, okay, your head is tilting to the left or to the forward or to the right, and it can, depending upon which way the hair cells are tilted, would communicate to the brain via the vestibular nerve how the head is oriented. And so now then you have information from all over the body. You have your own balance information for the head because you actually have relatively few pain and receptor cells in your head. And one of the things that most people don't realize is that there are no proprioception or pressure or somatosensory neurons in your brain, meaning that there's no receptors in your brain. So if you were to open up your brain, of course, you would feel going through the skull, but once you're in the brain, then you're not going to feel anything. And it's not like that anywhere else in your body. If you're in muscles, then of course afterwards your muscles are, you're going to feel sore. Your brain, while it might swell, it's not actually going to feel sore. And you can imagine why we wouldn't really need any receptors in our brain as we were developing, because if our brain got damaged, we'd probably just die. But it's really important that we get feedback with regards to where our head is in space. And so we have information with how the rest of our body is in space through proprioception, and we need information about how our head is within space and in relationship to the rest of our body. And this occurs through the vestibular system with these hair cells that orient, that respond to this fluid being moved sort of one way or another. And that information travels to your vestibular nerve and then to your somatosensory cortex where it's processed. And this concludes Chapter 11.